All right, guys, so today we are going to be solving quadratic equations again, but this time you're not going to be able to just take the square root. So if you look at our first example right down here, instead of, where's the example? There we go. Instead of just having an x squared or just having an x, we have an x squared and we have an x, which means I can't get x alone because I have more than one type of x. So we're going to use a different method to solve these kinds of problems. And that method is all based on this product right here, this product property. If two numbers multiply to be 0, then one of them has to be 0. It's a really simple property. If two things multiply to be 0, either the first one is 0 or the second one is 0. So here's what we're going to do. If you look at these steps right here, and we'll go through some of these together, it says step 1 is to set the equation equal to 0. So you want to move everything to one side, which is what they did. So right here you have everything on one side and it's equal to 0. Step 2 is to do our big X, and you want to factor that x squared plus 4x minus 5. So you put the negative 5 on top, you put the 4 on the bottom, and then you realize, oh, that's a plus 5 and a minus 4, or minus 4, a minus 1. And so your answer becomes x plus, or your equation becomes x plus 5, x minus 1 equals 0. In the last chapter, all you had to come up with was these parentheses, and you were done. But now we're going to use those parentheses and this idea of two things being multiplied to be 0. Because look, this parenthesis on the left multiplied by the parenthesis on the right, those multiply to be 0. That means either one of them can be the 0. So I set them both up to equal 0. So x plus 5 equals 0. I do my railroad tracks. X equals negative 5. X minus 1 equals 0. I do my railroad tracks and add 1 to both sides. X equals 1. So my two solutions are x equals negative 5 or x can equal 1. If I plug in either of those numbers, I'm going to cross, my parabola is going to cross that x-axis. Those are going to be my zeros. Those are my solutions. So let's look at some examples. Number 1, 2x minus 5 multiplied by x plus 7 equals 0. This one is nice because it's already set equal to 0, and they've already factored it for you. So all I have to do is set both parentheses equal to 0 and solve for x. So I do my railroad tracks, I add 5, I get 2x equals 5, I divide by 2. So x equals 5 halves. That's one of my solutions. And over here, x plus 7, if I minus 7 from both sides, x equals negative 7. That's my other solution. So that means my parabola is going to cross at negative 7, and it's going to cross at 5 halves, which is at about 2.5. So this would be 5 halves. So that's where my parabola is going to cross the x-axis, or at those two zeros, at those 2 points. All right, so number 2, x squared plus 13x plus 40 equals 0. It's already equal to 0, so now all I have to do is big X. 40 goes on top, 13 goes on the bottom. I need two things that multiply to 40, add up to 13, and that's going to be 8 and 5. So when I rewrite this, I get x plus 8, x plus 5. And again, in the last chapter, you stopped right there. But in this chapter, that is equal to 0. When I multiply those together, they equal 0. So that means this one could equal 0, or this one could equal 0. So if I set them both equal to 0 and railroad track, I get x equals negative 8 is one answer, and I minus 5 from both sides, and I get x equals negative 5 as my other answer. So I get two answers. Those are the two places that I'm going to cross, all right? Number 3, this one's a little bit messier, mostly just because there's things on both sides. So let's move everything over to the left. So I'm going to minus x squared right there. I'm going to minus 5x over here, and I'm going to add 2, and that should move everything to the left. Everything on this side will cancel. Let me get rid of those. So this is going to equal 0, and over here I'm going to have a 7. I'm going to have a negative 8x, and I'm going to have a x squared. So now I do my big X. I need 2 parentheses. So what multiplies to 7 and adds up to negative 8? Well, that's going to be negative 7 and negative 1. So when I rewrite my equation, I can write x minus 7, that's one parenthesis. X minus 1 is my other parenthesis, and those multiply to be 0, which means this could be 0, or this could be 0. So when I do my railroad tracks and add 7, x equals 7. And when I do my railroad tracks and add 1, x equals positive 1. Those would be my 2 solutions, all right? Number 4, there's a couple of different ways that you can do this one. Really, though, we're going to go the easy route, okay? Remember, whenever we were solving these in the last chapter, you would always look for the greatest common factor. Well, this has an x and this has an x, so we would have factored this out to do this. That's what we would have done in the last chapter. Well, I guess we would have just gotten this part, right? We wouldn't have equals 0. We would have just factored out an x. Well, now if I set that equal to 0, I have an x being multiplied by 3x minus 7, and when I multiply those together, I get 0, which means either my x is 0 or this one is 0. So if I set that equal to 0, railroad track, add 7, divide by 3, I end up with x equals 7/3 as my other answer. So I get 2 answers, a 0 and a 7/3. Okay, number 5, 4x squared minus 9 equals 0. See, and this is why we practice factoring so much in the last chapter. Hopefully you recognize the shortcut for this one. It's a difference of squares. You have a 4 and an x squared, and that's just 2 times 2 and x times x, right? And 9 is just 3 times 3. So without going through the work of a big X, I know my answer is going to be 2x plus 3 and 2x minus 3. We did that in the last chapter, but this chapter, those are equal to 0, which means that this one could be 0 or this one could be 0. So let's do the left one first. 2x plus 3 equals 0. I'm going to railroad track and minus 3. So 2x equals negative 3, divide by 2, divide by 2. X equals negative 3/2. That's one of my answers. And my other parenthesis is the exact same, but I have a minus in the middle. So that one's going to come out to be x equals positive 3/2. It's going to be the same number. It's just going to, instead of a minus, it's going to have a plus. So those would be my 2 answers for number 5. I like that one. Number 6, let's get everything moved to one side. So I have to minus 10x and I have to add 25 to both sides. So minus 10x, add 25, and I end up with what? X squared minus 10x plus 25 equals 0. So now I want to factor this. What multiplies to be 25 and adds up to be negative 10? Negative 5 and negative 5. So my parentheses become x minus 5, x minus 5, and then I have to set it equal to 0. Well, this one's a little bit different than our other ones because both of these become x minus 5 equals 0. So this one becomes x equals 5, and this one becomes x equals 5. Please do not tell me that the answer is x equals 5 and 5. That's the same number. So x is only equal to 5. It's the only number that works. So this is going to be one of those parabolas that it only touches at 5. It doesn't actually cross. It just touches the x-axis at 5 because there's only one solution. The other ones have had 2 solutions, so they've crossed in 2 places. This one only crosses in 1. Number 7, find the x-intercepts of the function. All it means by x-intercepts, it wants to know, hey, where does my function cross this line? Well, that's what we've been doing this entire time. We've already been solving that. So let's do the same thing. Let's take my function, x squared plus 5x minus 6, but let's set it equal to 0 so we can figure out where I cross that line. So I do my big X, and I get a negative 6 on top and a 5 on the bottom. So I'm going to get negative, no, I'm not. That's not going to work. What do I want? I want positive 6 and negative 1. So x plus 6, x minus 1, but those are equal to 0. So that means this one could be 0, x plus 6 equals 0, or this one is x minus 1 equals 0. Railroad track, x equals negative 6. Railroad track, x equals 1. Some of you have started to notice the shortcut instead of having to do this railroad tracks, and that's go ahead and use it. It works. Here's the difference. The x-intercepts, when we write our answer, we want to write points. We don't just want the x value. We want our x and y points. So my answer would actually be when x is negative 6, this is coming from right here, then y is 0. That's one of my answers. My other answer is when x is 1, my y is 0. Those 2 points are my x-intercepts. So the difference between solving and finding an x-intercept is just the way you write the answer. That's your number 1 difference right there. Otherwise, the math is all the same thing, okay? Number 8, we are going to actually do this one in class. We'll do that one together. We'll kind of go through the example there. I want you to kind of focus on what we've done already. We'll add this to it once I see you in person.